Hello, my name's Anand and you're very welcome. In today's video, we're going to explore fear. What is it? The different types of fear, how it can impact us. We'll also explore how fear supports us and the ways it can support us. And then I'll also explore how it can hinder us from fully living. So if you're new to this channel, you're very welcome. And if you're returning back, it's great to see you. My name's Anand and I'm an emotional wellness coach. And you can learn more about how I can support you in the description box below. And also there's a link there on how to book a coaching call with me, what I call a taste of coaching. It's a free 60-minute call where you get a taste of what it is you need in coaching. So let's jump into exploring a bit about fear. So each week over the last number of weeks, I've been using a single image, and each week I add a layer of colour and movement or texture to denote a specific emotion. And this is my visual representation of fear. So as you can see, there's colour and there's bits of white and grey, there's bits of red because sometimes red comes up when we think of fear. But it's also quite hidden because fear is an emotion we don't often want to confront. It's a very strong emotion, and yet all of us experience it. And often many of us can experience it on a daily basis, which I'll get into later on. The other thing is it almost can feel like a prison when we're imprisoned in a fear. And this can be where we've had a fear come up, we don't resolve it at that time, or it's not resolved. And so it emerges into something that's much more longer lasting, that becomes almost like a prison. So I call that like an illusionary fear. That it feels like a prison, but we're not actually in a prison. Now I'll get to that a bit, I'll unpack that a bit later. And that's why there's certain lines are disappearing. So the first type of fear is what I call like a physical fear, or it's a fear that you know is coming, it's approaching you. You're a pedestrian, you're about to step out onto the road, a car comes around, you need to stop and act quickly and pull yourself back. Or as a driver, you're going along on the road, a car pulls out, you need to slam on the brakes quickly. Fear arises, kicks us into action. Or if you live in a place where there's lots of wild animals, or in a time in our past, you would either go into fight, flight or freeze mode, depending on what is needed. But our bodies are designed to respond to fear by either one of these three mechanisms. Now that's not the case that we always go into those responses. So the first is a threat that we see coming. We know it's going to happen and we kick into action. But then there's the other type of fear. So if we think about watching the news, all the time there's a lot of bad news coming at us, threats. We're told about threats, the threat of climate change, the threat of global instability, the threat of war, the threat of economic decline, rising inflation, the threat of losing jobs. We're constantly hearing this threat, that threat, bad news sells. And so we're bombarded with fear talk. The question is it true? And it depends. The threat is real. The threat of whatever, but we don't actually know if these things are going to happen. We're being told they may happen. We're told there's a high likelihood because of A, B, C, and a D. But it's not like the kind of fear that I talked about that you see an approaching car and you need to kick into action. And I've observed, particularly since COVID, that we're living in an even more heightened state of fear because we've had COVID, there was that threat, then we've had the war in Ukraine, we have the war in between Israel and Palestine, we've all of these Other, we have the rise of AI. We don't know how AI is going to change our lives, but we're beginning to see what's happening there. We've all these technological advancements, which are amazing, but they're rapid. And we're in this massive space of change and the unknown and uncertainty, and that brings up fear. And then there's just the small little daily things of fears. And then there's phobias. There's anxiety. There's, the most extreme is terror. So fear comes in many, many forms. And all of it feels very real. But maybe, perhaps, some of us don't want to even acknowledge that we're in fear. We'll put it off as something else. Or it's not happening. And so we repress it until it grows. And then it's almost like we try to almost flatline ourselves so we don't feel fear. Or we try to contain our lives so small and so careful and so controlled that we're not actually really living our full life. I had this dream one time because I've experienced a lot of fear. And in the dream, there was this woman who was sitting in a room that was completely grey. She was wearing grey, it was grey carpet, grey walls. The only thing that was in it that wasn't grey was the window. And through the window was another room that was exactly mirroring. And there was loads of pink. And I had that dream several years ago, and it really stayed with me because it was such a contrast. And it was almost like my subconscious was telling me about the fear I was living in, the very limited, small, boxed in life that looked like a prison. That was kind of where I was at. And has fear gone away from me? No, it hasn't. But it is reducing, and I am able to meet it better. And that's what I want to share in this video, of the kind of fear that keeps you stuck in a pattern where you're really not fully living, where you're afraid to maybe take a risk on something, a small risk, whether it's to share something authentic online or to say something to somebody that you've been holding back. You're afraid to say something because you might offend them, but in actual fact it's a truth you need to say. I'll give another example. I wrote a blog where I was terrified of driving. And I used the word terror because as I was learning to drive, it's like I could see a million different ways of how I could die when I got in a car. And I had full-blown panic attacks. So I avoided driving for decades. I tried to learn, couldn't do it. I'd keep trying, and then I would just no, I'm never going to be a driver. Until I wanted to move out to the countryside. So my desire to live in the countryside became stronger than my fear of driving. I literally had to drive. And so I forced myself to drive a car. I had some really good support, but at first it would be panic attacks and massive anxiety. And I might drive for 5 minutes and stop. And I built it up. And eventually, long story short, I passed my driving test 2 years ago almost. And I really like driving. And it's amazing. It's an amazing feeling when you confront and meet your fear that's been holding you back. In my case, I lost out on jobs and opportunities and not living in the place that I wanted to live in. There were so many things holding me back. I lacked freedom. I always had to go on public transport, which now I'm no, I don't want to do public transport. It can be great, but I much prefer having my own car, playing my music, the open road, and really enjoying driving. But I denied myself that enjoyment. I denied myself that growth opportunity. When we put ourselves in a prison of fear, where we ignore it, dismiss it, we never move on from there. We stay stuck. So I have a question for you, because it's all well and good. I hear you saying, yeah, and yeah, drop the fear and whatever. It's not that easy, and it isn't. It isn't easy, because fear is such a powerful emotion. It keeps us frozen or stuck or in a perpetual loop of, I can't move forward. I get it. We go in, we close in. So I like to ask a question for you to consider, and it's to do with trust. Trust for me is very closely linked with fear. Because when we trust ourselves, fear decreases or disappears altogether. Or when we trust our environment, or we trust those around us, fear diminishes. So my question to you is, how much do you trust yourself? On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being I fully trust myself, 1 is I do not trust myself. Where are you on this scale? Then applying this to your environment. I feel safe or I trust my environment, 1 to 10. Where are you on that scale? And then the final question is, I trust those in my life, my loved ones, 1 to 10. These 3 questions are a very good benchmark to see where you are on what I call the trustometer or trustometer. Where are you on these 3 scales? If you feel safe in your environment, you're going to feel less fear. If you feel safe with those around you, you're going to feel less fear. And if you trust yourself, you're going to feel the ability to move forward and to go for things. So there was a great book years ago, Susan Jeffers, who said, feel the fear and do it anyway. And I really agree with that. But it also takes an element of trust. Can I trust myself to do this thing, or to share this thing, or to open up to this thing, or to go for a business? I was really scared about the idea of setting up my own coaching business. I was terrified. But it's like, do I go for it, or I just hold back and play it safe? And I'm really glad I'm here, because I wouldn't be here talking to you about fear if I didn't take the leap of faith, if I didn't trust myself to go, yes, Anand, you have the skills, the ability, the whatever to make this happen. And so here I am. It's the same with driving. Trusting myself that I could learn how to drive. I could become a good driver. And so when you understand where you are on the trust, 1 being very low, 10 being high, where are you? And then looking at whether it's within your environment, those around you, or within yourself, of what can you build trust in. So let's say your environment, you feel like the world is a very scary place, and you, in order to kind of know what's going on, you watch a lot of news and you watch it late at night. That I can tell you, and there are studies, you can research it online. There are studies that show watching news, and a lot of it late at night, will add to your anxiety and fear. It's like, with fear, it's like we're trying to control everything. Well, there are some things that are uncontrollable. You cannot control them. So there's an element of surrendering in to what is. And you might say, well, no, I can do this and I can do that. And if you can, great. And if it works for you, great. If it doesn't work for you and you're trying to control the uncontrollable, you're creating more stress and fear within yourself. So that comes back to where you are on the trust within yourself. Where you've identified those fears, it's like challenging it. Is it true? Is that a real fear? Or is it an illusionary fear? Or one that's just haunting you, holding you back, even though you know where it came from and what its pattern is and all of that? Because fear can keep us stuck. It can hold us back from taking risks. So maybe it's exploring that through journaling. Or what I love to do for myself, and I share it with clients, is draw an image of fear. What does fear look like? What's its shape, colour, texture, size? All of that. Give it a word, give it a name, whatever works for you. Give it a sound. You know, if you're into maths, do a mathematical equation of fear. Whatever works for you, put a shape on it. Because fear can feel like this all-pervasive, clouding emotion that blocks everything out. And that's, again, with this image, I use these colours because they cover over all the other colours within ourselves when it takes over. So give it a shape, give it a colour, give it a name, have a dialogue with it, talk to it. Hello, fear. You know? What is it you're trying to tell me? What do you want from me? How can you help me rather than hinder me? And if you're in a situation where you're immediately really feeling anxious, you're in maybe a social situation, and somebody's saying something to you and you feel yourself freeze and you're like, and you don't know what to do, exhale. This is a great tip from Osho. Exhale first. Just let all the air out of your body and then inhale. And then exhale again. What that does is it throws the emotion out with the exhale in that moment. It allows the body to inhale by itself, which brings more oxygen into the brain, which lowers down the anxiety or the fear. Can be a great one to do just before you're about to do a talk. I do it often before I'm about to do a YouTube video. And when I get stuck, or I buy myself time. If I've gone into freeze mode and somebody's wanting something from me and I don't want to be rude to them and I feel myself freezing, I'll just go, what do I do? And it's just, okay, I'm in fear. I'll just go, let me come back to you on that one. You don't need to respond there and then, especially when you're in fear. So these are just some ways that you can meet with and address fear. Explore this more with me. Do get in touch. The details are down below. And I will see you in the next video where we'll explore the final emotion in this series. So thanks very much for listening. And I hope you have a great day. Bye-bye.